continuing on with my series on the 3 blend modes that you need the most. We're on video number 2. So the first video we covered the multiply blend mode, okay? Because there's a lot of blend modes that exist here inside the layers palette. You don't need to know what all of them do. There's really 3 that you're going to find yourself that you're going to all the time, okay? So the first one was multiply. I covered that in the last video. The next one is screen, okay? Let me show you one quick example of something that we can do with it, all right? So see all these little scribbles. So how do we do something like that? Well, if you watch the multiply video, you saw that I took a black and white logo and dropped it onto an image and changed it to multiply, and it dropped out the white. Well, here's the exact opposite, okay? Here's this image that I downloaded, and it's black background, but everything else that I really want is white. So what I would do is I'd make a selection, just using my lasso tool here. I'd make a selection, copy it, go over to the photo, and paste it on top, okay? So now I've got the black here. Well, if you remember, multiply drops out the white. So that's not what we want to do here, okay? So it's just dropped out the white. It's still black. It doesn't look good. What we do instead is we change it to screen. Screen is the exact opposite of multiply, okay? So while multiply darkens, screen brightens. And when it sees something that's totally black, it gets rid of it. And then everything else that's not totally black, the gray, the darker grays, it tends to fade away a little bit more, not quite as much as black. As things get brighter, it'll start to make those things brighter, except if it gets all the way to white. Okay? But just think of it this way. Multiply drops out the white, screen drops out the black, and it brightens. It's a brightening blend mode. Okay, so then you can go through, and I did a few here. I just kind of went through. I grabbed all the little letters. I grabbed her name, grabbed a couple little squigglies and swirlies and all these little different things and dropped a bunch of them on there. Okay, so that's one example. Another example is retouching. Okay, whenever you want to brighten, it doesn't have to be a portrait retouch, but think of it this way. Whenever you want to brighten a part of a photo, that's where you can use screen. So we'll press Command or Control J, and this happens quite a bit. Especially you'll find it with natural light outdoor portraits. Okay, where the eye sockets tend to get a little bit darker than everything else. Okay, so what we can do here, remember, multiply darkens everything, screen brightens everything. Okay, so it's brightened the whole entire photo. It's gone too far, and that's where, and that happens all the time. Very rarely will you change this to screen. Everything looks great. It doesn't happen. Okay, so then we come in here and we add our layer mask. I'm going to give you a little tip here. You could add the layer mask, and you could go to your brush tool and paint with black and paint everything else away. Or before you add the layer mask, hold down your Option key on Mac, Alt on PC, and it flips it. It puts the layer mask into hide mode. So it's hidden everything. So now it's essentially the same exact image right on top of each other because the layer mask has hid everything. So now I take my brush tool. Layer mask is black. What color does that mean I paint on it with? I paint on it with the opposite color, which is white. Let's change my foreground color to white. And then I'll come over here and I'll kind of just very lightly brush. I'm using a Wacom pen and tablet. Just kind of brush over the eye sockets before, after. If it's too much, reduce the opacity. You can blend them in. So blend modes, in addition to blending, which is what blend modes do, blend modes can be blended even more by going under the opacity setting and tweaking it there. So that's before, that's after. Just kind of, I do it a lot of my outdoor portraits. Anything that I take outdoors, you'll see that happens quite a bit if you're not using a reflector to bounce light back in a person's face. A lot of times their eye sockets get dark. Okay, now, one more example. And this is going to go to a portrait retouch too. Remember, her eyes kind of look darker here. Okay, the whites of her eyes. So we want to make them stand out a little bit more. Command or Control J. Remember, multiplies our darkening blend mode. Doesn't do what we want. Screen is going to make everything brighter. Same thing as before. I could add a layer mask. I could use my brush tool in black. I could paint away everything, and it's too tedious to do that. Instead, just hold down Option or Alt first. Puts the layer mask in black, and now all I have to do is a very little amount of work, which is come over here and just paint with white instead of painting the entire photo back. And so let's zoom in here. Okay, that's before, that's after. And I would probably switch this back over to black, tweak it a little bit. I don't think I was exactly precise as I painted over this. Change it back to white, maybe make my brush smaller, and you can kind of just go in there and fill in. And a lot of times, especially if you do this with eyes, a lot of times their eyes are going to be abnormally bright if you leave it like that. So she goes from that to ET, basically. All you got to do is just reduce the opacity. You'll find somewhere, 50, 60% is usually going to be the sweet spot for that. Just reel it back in, and that way you're able to come in and just brighten the eyes, and we can probably get away with a little bit more there. But that's the idea, is anything, or the first one we looked at was multiply. That's a darkening blend mode. Anytime you want to brighten something, you're generally going to go to screen. Okay, you're going to duplicate a layer, change it to screen, and just use your layer mask to go in there and just blend away anything that you don't want. Change anything that you didn't want to get bright. You can hide those parts. But that's the key to this. Is just remember, screen is your brightening blend mode. It's the exact opposite of multiply. It does the exact opposite thing. Multiply darkens, screen brightens. Okay, so that was video number 2 in a 3-part series of the 3 blend modes that you will use the most. In the next video, we'll take a look at the third and final. Well, there's kind of like 4, but we can cover them both because they both almost do the same thing. We'll take a look at that in the next video.